So I'd like to thank everyone for coming today and to this over the next few minutes. Hopefully, you're going to learn a lot about where we are and where people would like to see us going. And I'm just delighted to introduce. Well, my name is Rebecca Roper. As you probably all know, I'm the head of teaching and learning here in IDT. I work very closely with the Students' Union, with everybody, and part of the Teaching and Learning Committee here in IDT. This project, which is part of the VITAL program that we've been running since the 8th of November, was kindly funded by the National Forum for the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning in Ireland. And yes, we've just really, it's been a great, I hope that everyone's enjoyed and got to pick pieces that they liked out of that. It was interesting this morning, I was listening to the radio and there was a big piece on academic integrity, which is one of the sessions we had done a week before last, I think it was. And so it was great because they were kind of echoing the talking points that we were discussing as well. And soon we will have a video of everything that has happened over the last 3 weeks that's being put together at the moment by the wonderful editing team. Producer is Vicky Muin on that, and Campbell Gibson, and also a shout out to John Scally and also to the wonderful Sithi Padhi. I can't say her last name right, Padhi, I think it is, or Padhe. They're marvelous. They're part of the film team. They're currently film students. We also have a great video that kind of enticed people to come and take part in our groups, our focus groups last week. And that was put together by the animation team led by Ewan. And it's a lovely piece. So you'll get a chance to look back on all this once we get them established on the website. And in the meantime, I'm so glad that you are here so that you can be part of this conversation that's happening right now. And with that, let me introduce to you the queen of conversation. This is Janie Lazar, and Janie and I just recently met for this project. She was recommended to me, and I have really enjoyed working with her. Her background is in communications, and one of the things she's famous for saying is, everything starts with communication. Everything starts with a conversation. So that is the way forward for, what we're doing here in IDT. She's also worked extensively as a facilitator. She's also worked with the TEDx movement. And she actually happens to be a celebrant as well. So the next time I'm having an event, so if anyone's out there christening children or getting ready for end of life or getting married, this is the woman to talk to, because there's a gentle humanity about her that I have enjoyed, and I'm sure that you will too. So without further ado, I am okay. Can you see me now? Can you see the screen? Thank you. Fantastic. So these are the results from the staff and student focus groups carried out just last week for COVID-19 with myself and the wonderful Jamie Lazar. And again, thanks to VITAL, which is part of the National Forum, the IDTSU, who are amazing, and the IDT Teaching and Learning Committee. And of course, to the Institute that we all call home.
The next station is
Somebody's on their phone. I love it. But can you mute yourself? Because I'm getting the next station is. I'm guessing maybe. I don't know who it is. Thank you so much. All right, guys. Off we go. So I'm heading you over to Janie to talk a little bit about the purpose. I'll be flashing different things that are going on the screen, but this was kind of what we started out with and where we headed and what we want to do.
That's lovely. Thank you, Rebecca. And as Rebecca quite rightly said, my approach to life is everything begins with a conversation, and it's all about context. And at the moment, we're, I suppose, moving through the pandemic, trying to re-establish ourselves with a life that is going to be very different. But what we wanted to do was, if you like, capture how everyone felt. They had managed through COVID and how they're managing now and where we're going in the future. It really is putting everything in context. So that's really what we've captured here. If we move on, because I know the interesting bits, very interesting bits to us, were the engagement with each of the groups. So I think, Rebecca, what we might do is flip backwards and forwards and just go over, if you like, how we did this research.
Yes.
Move on to the methodology there.
Yeah. So what we did was we kind of we come up with the idea of actually doing this to investigate the experience, to document in some way as a snapshot of what people had experienced over the last 18 months and going forward. So what we actually did to do this is we drew up questions that were facilitated not only by ourselves, but we had some input from the student services and the Office of Registry. And then we sent invitations to all staff and to all students, which distributed a link to Microsoft Teams. And we had a good response, but unfortunately, because of timelines, you'll see that we could only accommodate a certain number of people because which speaks to how busy everybody is. So we had one PMASS, the professional, managerial, administrative, and support staff session. We had an academic staff session, and then we had 2 focus groups for students, and that was on the Thursday. So the 2 for staff were on the Tuesday, and then Thursday we met up with some of the students. And we were very specific. Unfortunately, we was really condensed. In future, you want to run these so that people had more time to, pick and choose, because everyone's timetable is so fraught at the moment. And the sessions are confidential. And these were co-facilitated by myself and Janie. So that's kind of how we ran it out. In addition, I just popped a short survey in to kind of capture. We talked to the last group of students, I think, on Thursday afternoon, and they were saying it would be great to include people who couldn't be here. So I did do another survey. I did not distribute this to staff because they're inundated with emails, and there have been a couple of complaints coming through that people were just like, "Oh God, please stop." So if we decide to take this work further, we might ask for that input, which would be great. But I found the focus groups really great, the in-person ones, because you really had that qualitative bounce off of each other, and you could kind of, and that sharing of ideas and experiences, I think, really brought people together in an interesting way, which was lovely. So we have a small sample, but a variety of disciplines are represented in that sample across lecturing and across our student participants. Janie.
Can we have our art back? The big question. I think what we learned is yes, we can. And what we need to do is to do it in a way differently that respects our learning experience throughout COVID. I don't know about you guys, but I really missed live theatre, just the engagement, the ability to be creative, which isn't always possible through online platforms. So that was really the very, very big question there. If you put it back into context, which I think is so important for this, IADT has such a reputation for creativity, for engagement, for connection, and that comes through in the quality of, if you like, the learning outcomes, the projects that are undertaken by the college. And with the help of the different groups and the research that came through, this is where we're at now, to try and join the dots to see how we can have our art back in a way that maintains that quality.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the other overall thoughts had to do with a sense of our world is shrinking. This is what we were hearing a lot from our students in particular. There was like a shrinking of the world, and those disciplines like art, like sculpture, like film, like actually all of them, and not just the creative ones, but there's a lot of hands-on learning that happens in business, that happens in humanities to lesser extent possibly, but really that sense of not being able to, do the thing that they needed to do with each other really came out through. So the other thing was that the time online that people were spending was just really extended. And in addition to that, there was a real lack of social connection that was felt. Harder to navigate. Connections were not spontaneous anymore. And one of the students actually said, "I live in a little box, and this is my bedroom." And that really stuck with me, and I think yourself as well, really resonated, Jean. So we're going to go to the staff, first staff cohort that we talked with, and that was the professional, managerial, administrative, and support staff. And I'm just going to lay out the questions that we asked. And they're very similar across all 3 of the different cohorts that we spoke with, but there are differences between, just kind of tweaked to fit their own experience. And they were, basically we asked everyone what their overall experience was of COVID during in regard to their work, whatever that is, their learning in IDT across COVID. That we also asked about where they were doing that work when they were at home, and did they feel as though they had support from their manager, and if so, how did that how was that, and if not, what could they have done better, and what are the benefits of working at home, and what are the challenges. And then we finally asked everybody if they were comfortable returning to campus, and how possibly could we make them more comfortable if it was within our power. So those are the questions. And I'm going to turn you back over to Janie to talk a little bit about the key observations that we gleaned from the group, the PMASS staff.
Very, very interestingly, many found that they had greater flexibility as well as greater productivity working remotely. And it did lead to, if you like, extensive upskilling really, really quickly. What it meant as well was that online, everybody became much more focused. Meetings were sharper. They got straight to the point. Obviously, the other side of that is that there isn't room for the normal chit chat that fosters good connection and engagement. They had different support from their managers to facilitate the day-to-day remote learning. So on top of different, if you like, business meetings, there were meetings on top of meetings to make sure that the online meetings actually happened, if that makes sense. One thing that came through very, very strongly was that there is the need to establish codes of conduct. We know how to behave when we're with together in person. That comes naturally, and we learn by feeling what is right. Online, it's a little bit more tricky.
Yeah.
And maybe as we move forward, and I hate that expression, but as we grow to, if you like, embrace online in different ways, we have to take on into consideration how to behave as well as we can, to communicate as well as we can.
Because it is
And
very
just
different, isn't it? The communication when you're online, and
massively,
there's a huge difference between writing and from the something like a Zoom thing where you are kind of face to face. But it is finding that, and they don't have to be hard and fast rules, but it's just sort of agreed between people. And this really came out within this cohort. Sorry about this. So I'm just popping on to the
on
next one here. Oh, sorry. Was there something that you wanted to add? Now I have to go back all the way through the bill. I tell you what, people. Was there something else you wanted to add on this one, Janie?
no, just it was really moving on to the next one, the whole feeling, if you like, around COVID and masks and how we interact with each other. Because I think as everyone engages, it's learning how to be comfortable with each other. And that's not always easy when there isn't a clear messaging on wearing masks, not inside, outside. Just it's unknown. We're in uncharted territory. That's probably the best way to put it. And with that, there comes a little bit of unease. We don't know who's been vaccinated, who hasn't, if somebody maybe is being tested.
Mm.
All of these are the unasked questions, and in a way, they're the unspoken fears and concerns we have. So I think guidance is needed, definitely, to ease our fears.
I
And
thought it was
maybe
interesting as well. So sorry. Just that there was a sense that, this from this cohort, I want to go back and say, because it's really great to hear they felt so supported by their managers and they were able to talk to them daily in terms of running their daily work. That was really, really great, positive. But then they'd feel very uncomfortable kind of being on campus because they felt as though they worked so well remotely that it should have been a kind of a that's something that kind of needed to come out, particularly like being in the canteen, these sort of places they just don't feel comfortable, and there's really nothing that can be done. They didn't make a suggestion, but the idea of having more of a choice in terms of working from home would help that.
and this really came through very, very strongly. For some people, COVID provided a gap. They could take their foot off the pedal. But I think for a lot of people in administrative roles and support roles, they kept working throughout. So again, coming back to language and perception, back to work isn't always back on campus, because again, back to individual personalities and preferred ways of working, what we have discovered is sometimes we can be more productive when we work remotely. There's not always a need to be physically on campus. And that came through so strongly. Some people felt they had never stopped working. So yes, there's a push to be back on campus. And I expect as well from management very keenly they want everything to get back to a degree of what was considered normal. But maybe there's a question there. We need to look at how people can work remotely where they don't need to be on campus, because that may add to the, if you like, the feeling of feeling safe with less people on site. So I'll just move on very quickly. I mean, we touched on it there. Not all jobs are the same. Some can be done remotely. And that really was emphasized, particularly within this group. A few little quotes that came up, and Rebecca, do jump in here because I'm aware that I'm flying through, and this
Oh,
is, if you like, lunch break for people.
yeah.
There was a definite feeling of where, if you like, particularly within the support and administrative roles, there was a requirement to get work done. And so one quote that stuck with me, when I'm in work, whether I'm at home in work or on campus on work, I like to work. There's a job to be done. I need to get my work done.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting thing, because that some that idea that how long are these people actually working online, and it's very long, and that can be difficult, and that's something that needs to be addressed. So one of the other things people were saying was that when you're working online, it can bring you closer in some ways, because you're seeing the person that you're talking to, but it can also go pear-shaped, and it can be a little bit painful, and whereas you get so many more cues when you're face to face with your colleagues. And the other observation, which I thought was really interesting, was that people behave differently hiding behind the screen, and we had some memorable quotes from this group, and I think you mentioned one of them. In work, I like to work. And there's an interpretation on that, Janie, if you want to share that.
It's it's one of those things. Perhaps this isn't exactly where you meant me to go, Rebecca, but certainly, whether you're introvert, extrovert, there's some people find it easier to just simply get on with the work.
Yeah.
It has an impact, obviously, as well. If you don't have to travel, you can focus on the work. For some people, it's easier not to be in a room with somebody or a group of people. They can get things done. For others, they miss the chat in the corridor or in the canteen.
Yeah.
Online, though, there's also less chit chat. You're booked in for a slot. It runs from, as we're doing now, 1 to 2 o'clock. We have to get certain things done. Less room for chit chat. That can be a bit lonely. And it can be as lonely as being on campus with nobody around.
Yeah. And I think the
Things are
PMAS staff,
different.
yeah, the
Yeah,
PMAS staff would feel that really keenly because they work year round, so they're in the summertime. Every time we come back in a normal situation, they're always effusively glad to see the students, as we all are, and even more so now. So yeah, really, really lovely stuff. This was the
The
last point here. Yeah, do you want to talk to this a little bit?
yeah, it's again, what we're finding is that we've all got to be flexible and adaptable, and particularly for people who have families working from home. And in this instance, it was somebody whose husband works from home, and having young children, it gave them more flexibility between them to manage different things whilst, if you like, there were restrictions in the outer world. But that's going to change. So depending on what's actually happening in the outer world, the remote working facility to be able to focus and get stuff done, and in many instances get more done, is
Yeah,
going to keep changing. And
absolutely.
everyone's situation is going to be different.
And I think it goes back to exactly what we started with: communication, having the conversation, see what works for people. We're going to move on to the staff, the academic staff now. And these were the questions that we asked, similar to the ones before. Um, and we asked, to talk about their experience of students with lecturing, workshops, seminars, and technical training in these different kind of areas. We talked about the number of meetings that they have, the same or more or less than in person. So I've got somebody who's outside the door here waiting for me to come in. So I'm going to let you take the rest of these questions there. And I have to answer the door. Really sorry. Let me just mute this real quickly. Thanks.
What,
I'm
what,
glad
what,
you're
what
here,
I
Jane.
what I love about working online like this is all of a sudden different documents disappear from your screens. Different things happen, like people don't realize you're working when you're working at home. I often have people knocking at my door as well. So I think we just have to, if you like, rock with whatever happens there. Context is indeed everything. We went through the questions there for academic staff. What I want to do is jump straight in because for me, as somebody from the outside looking in, there's a big difference between support and academic and professional staff and the teaching staff. And what I really felt was there's a big emotional difference in the way academic staff are feeling at the moment. Most academics love what they do, they're passionate about what they do, and I could really feel the sense of frustration
Mm.
uh, and tiredness. If you're like me as well, and I do a lot of coaching, a lot of training, trying to maintain the usual energy that you have and passion for what you do whilst managing all the tech is a challenge. And what we have to look to as we're moving forward is how we can best manage this. Because what we don't want to do is lose the enthusiasm, the passion, the quality of the teaching
Yeah.
towards some of the time that may be necessary to spend on tech. So there's a balancing act to be considered as we move on. I'm just going to speak to some of the memorable quotes that came up here. I didn't sign up for this, nor did the students I teach. I'm a better teacher in person. That's what lecturers have become used to. Nobody knows what's going on with the virus on campus. So it can impact how you relate to people in person or through Zoom or other mediums, but also if live streaming is happening. We've got all of these different environments to accommodate and to relate to, if you like. And we're still in the middle of this pandemic. We're still in it. Nobody really knows what the plan is. There was a feedback from one of the lecturers who said the students have nowhere to go. Rooms are being commandeered for different purposes. Even the chapel is gone. Somewhere where you could go to have a little bit of peace, a bit of headspace, that has gone. And the days are being stretched. I think at the moment, because some people are being given a schedule where they're maybe teaching online, and then later in the day they're finding that they're actually teaching in person. Again, this is new ground for everybody, and it's trying to find the best way to maintain the quality of what they're doing. And the key question coming from the teaching staff was, how can they have more impact in the next iteration of how the college delivers excellence?
And I think that's something I'd just like to chime in there. It's the question that this can't be the new normal, but we're still in emergency mode, and we haven't, changed practices. And this whole thing hit us at a time that we were rolling out brand new programs for programmatic that we had developed over programmatic review, and this was the iteration. September is when we rolled these out. So you have some really excited lecturers and trepidatious. They're not quite sure how everything's going to run. These are new programs. Throw on top of that this emergency state that we went through for 18 months, and in a way we're still there. And one of the lecturers said, I thought it was great, we've been spinning plates since March 12th of 2020. And there comes a time where we have to put the plates down, stop the circus, and say, okay, how are we going forward? What is this going to look like? Their concerns are very much around, obviously, the students, as you can see in the quotes, but it's also about themselves in terms of their work practice and what they're going to give to the students and how they're going to deliver that. How do we do this? That's really one of the questions that came through, and they want to make sure that there's a way that input. So we were thanked for the conversation, which was nice. And I know, to be honest with you, I know we have excellent HODs throughout and the institute, and they do listen, and they are there to kind of help with whatever's going on. They are stretched to the teeth as well. So we're dealing with a situation that we have been on emergency, and that level of cortisone in the body, it's just daily. And at this point, it's like, okay, we know we have to go forward in some way, shape, or form, but we just don't know what that's going to look like. So how can we ensure that we have a say, and students obviously need that too, to make sure that what we're doing lives up to that academic excellence. And I think that was a really important point, that I felt, yeah, absolutely. And they also talked a lot about being on site and the safety around that, the sense that the offices are not overcrowded usually, but they are now when you're considering the air quality. A big problem people are having is they're supposed to be doing a Zoom meeting, or they're doing something on Blackboard, they're teaching a class, and there's 3 other people in the office or 2 other people in their office, and they can't actually do anything because you're live streaming from your office. Also, and the ventilation is an issue. Number of cases. This was something else that came out. The staff didn't seem. They wanted to be more aware of how many numbers there were within the institute in terms of outbreaks. They weren't looking for individual data, certainly not, but they did want to know. Like one of the lecturers said, I had no idea we even had one student case. So that communication, again, that conversation needs to happen so that everyone's aware of that. Better communication was, really something that was being put out there, and the sense of the numbers, and how things are going overall, because they're all concerned about it. And ventilation is a big issue, which normal situation would be fine. The CO2 monitors are very appreciated, and they do help give guidelines, and you can look and say, okay, we need to get out of the room. But we're just hoping things get better soon. Sometimes I think is the situation. Yeah, a lot of good comments on the support that we get from Paul and others who have helped us a lot upskill in this really short period of time. Very stressful, but very useful. Yep, exactly. It's a Wishka learning curve. This is something that I've actually discussed with IT, and I think that they're working on it, getting a direct contact when you're in the room. Let's say you're teaching in a room, and you go in and the tech isn't working. In someone's case, they couldn't get on to something because it wasn't working. Now it's a quick fix for one of the technicians, probably just pushing the button, and maybe it's in the wrong thing. But when you're in front of, or you're your class, it's horrible, because you only have 50 minutes, and you've got to clean down the desktops, and all this different stuff has to happen before you leave the room. We need a direct contact. The staff really felt as though they need an emergency line, so to speak, the hotline, to if someone's available to come and help them out when they need that help. So it's getting that help when you need it, and that's something else that comes through in the student voice as well. And some courses just don't suit that online delivery method. Yeah, so I mean, it's looking at that, and looking at everyone's course loads and saying, as a team, maybe, and looking and saying, okay, what can we deliver online? What works to deliver online? And then maybe moving forward from there. And I think those conversations have happened, but maybe they need to happen more frequently. So we're going to move into my favorite part of this, which is the students, obviously, because they're the reason for the season, as I often say. Yeah, and I want to make sure we have a little time for questions. So I'll fly through this, and then I'll turn you over to the wonderful Janie again. So not dissimilar Activities during COVID, how were your study, lectures, group work? How did you negotiate that during the lockdown? What were you using in terms of an online platform? Lectures, what kind of support did you get in your studies? More the same, less, more than in-person learning? And the impact of college closure, what did that have studying at home, if it had any effect on your well-being, or so we discussed that and we asked when people engage with student services, did they, how did they find that experience? And then finally, do you feel confident to come in person? And what can we do overall to enhance your student experience? That one was kind of hard to get to because they kind of said, get rid of COVID. I don't know if that's within our remit, but I think that's the general thing. So I'm going to hand you back over to the wonderful Janie. We're talking a little bit about an overall view of the voices from the students.
I think it's fair to say that everybody has begun to spend, or pre-COVID, everyone had begun to spend far more time online than ever before, and then COVID exacerbated that. Our online usage went up. Our learning how to master different apps, we did that at the speed of light.
Yeah.
But what it's highlighted is students, especially younger generations, already spent massive amounts of time online.
Yeah.
And this amount of screen time then just went through the roof. Combine that with not being able to go outside, be able to engage, connect. All of a sudden, it was, if you like, online all the time, quite often from one space. People move from, if you like, their bed to a desk.
Yeah.
And back again, and maybe sometimes not even that amount of movement. It became, there were no boundaries anymore. And the students, I think, particularly felt that and missed the online, the connection that you have automatically when you're in a physical space on campus, the energy of different people.
Yeah.
Boundaries didn't exist anymore. It was just one long screening, if you like.
Yeah, it's people were saying they could be at their desk for 15 hours a day in front of the screen, 10 to 15 hours a day. And when the winter came, it was far worse. They really had a sense of just, despair. And there was a general fatigue from being online that much in terms of screen, 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 screen. And even though there were social events that were available for them, they were on screen. And a lot of students, after being, in 8 hours of lectures or 6 hours of lectures, the last thing they want to do is do some screen time. And one of the other things that came out of that was that a lot of the students didn't, in the class cohorts, they didn't turn their cameras on because, they're in their bed, probably in their, PJs and their duvet. And that really, it was difficult then to have any kind of social connection online for the other students who were in the class. And what was really missed as well is having those chats, bouncing off ideas from lecturers, trying to develop the work in an in-person way, hands-on, having that feedback. And another part of it was that one of the students was saying that they just, their lecturers were great. However, when they had a problem, they'd email them, and sometimes they get back, and then sometimes, it'd be 2 or 3 days before they'd have, and I mean, it just was very hard to connect and very hard to get that learning experience that, people have been promised. I know this is not news to you guys, but it's great to have, what's, have it down, have it written. Some of the students were talking about, actually, they developed their own kind of study groups, and these were mature students in this particular case, and they found that really, really useful. So they would have a set time that they'd all meet on Zoom to kind of talk about the week and what they were doing and this sort of thing. And it was very interesting, and I think we'll kind of push on with that. But it was just interesting that this particular student said it was as though the younger students had, they wanted that social connection, but they didn't have the confidence to initiate something like that. So some of the lecturers that I know did, create spaces within teams for groups to meet and such. So it's a varied picture, but one of the other things, in contrast, the student said there's so many less distractions online. I get my work done. So there are positives within all this, and these were some of the kind of the thoughts that they had. These are kind of their quotes, and you might drill in on this, Janie.
I mean, it's back to my life has become, if you like, contained in a box. You know,
Yeah,
for one of the mature students said it was like living in a little bedsit.
yeah,
You know, the world had shrunk. The next comment for me, I think, sums up the essence of what has come through across all of the uh, research sessions that we had. You forget that college is a physical place.
yeah, yeah,
And that is something I think we shouldn't lose sight of. That's where relationships are formed. That's where, if you like, at all levels, personal growth takes place.
yeah.
It's where creativity gets sparked. It's where physical studies in terms of how can you progress sculpture and receive tuition effectively online?
Yeah, yeah,
How can somebody talk to you about a perspective of a 3D model when they can't, raise their head up or down? And I'm actually doing this as I'm talking to you because I'm trying to see through the windows of an imaginary um, house that's just been designed or a studio. There's certain things that you can't do online.
yeah.
It
And
can
it always takes
support.
longer, doesn't it? It always takes longer
Everything
online.
takes longer.
Uh,
Again,
because
back to manners, and manners sounds terribly old fashioned, but it is that courtesy. I've noticed it with many different groups. The quality of moderation will
yeah,
have an impact on the levels of engagement and how we can ensure that everyone who is present is able to make their contributions comfortably and be responded to respectfully.
yeah,
It's 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 a different way of learning that we can learn how to do differently and to do better, but it's
yeah.
going to take time.
We all miss
It's
the
going to
corridor
take
conversations. We all miss this. And yeah, I mean, there's particular notes here as well. Students had felt this, I thought was really interesting. People who, and a lot of our students experience social anxiety. And in a way, they were, it was easier to interact online. And that then they started longing for face to face. So when they came back, they found that the social anxiety had diminished because their desire for connection over, kind of like superseded it, which was very interesting, and an appreciation for that anticipation of human contact. Um, People who had lived and worked pretty much as before, who actually were, very involved with their computers and such for their work, they tended to fare a little better with the online experience. But for others, it was, I just want to be in the studio making things. That's it. That's all I want. Um, but as I mentioned before, some people found it easier to focus and get more done. Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. Very interesting. Then the next slide I just want to show you is it first year. I know this is a funny one, isn't it? The first one of the students gave this to us. This was their calendar for 1 week in, I guess it's January. Okay, so they've got their lectures there. They've got guest lectures. They've got, I mean, and they have all the online lectures, online tutorials. Look at the bottom. How much time are they spending online? It's absolutely insane. And then they also have part-time job. Okay, they have two part-time jobs. Okay, one of them is in the blue, the lighter blue, but it's still um, no, that's a different one. So they were, yeah. Anyway, you can see it's so heavy. This is, and most of this is online, with the exception of the in-person part-time job on the Sunday, but they also have other work that they do during the week as well. That it's online, on Zoom. They're doing tuition on Zoom. So, I mean, this is just a typical, and also a very organized person. Obs, I mean, come on, this is an amazing looking. I wish my calendar was so pretty. I mean, geez, great. There you are. You've got well, we've got some great students. But I just wanted to kind of share that with you. Um,
And
so, yeah,
this actually, Rebecca,
yeah,
makes me laugh because this is more me. And I suspect a lot of people as well who may not have adapted to the tech as quickly. I just think the contrast is fascinating here.
Yes.
Just yeah, just the desire to actually do something that's tactile and may suit the way in which your mind works better.
Yeah.
Pens, papers, markers, post-it notes.
Exactly. Yeah. Some people are at that tactile kind of a thing, and it appeals to a lot of our learners. One of some of the other kind of observations that um, people were always dependent upon technology, and COVID made this worse because they could never turn off. So there was no. I mean, goes back to the lack of boundaries. Nowhere, that they had their leisure, and how do they work that out? And I kind of the online communication and the misunderstanding that can come without face-to-face learning, texts, emails that people infer a tone in, that if they were just having that conversation, it wouldn't be there because you'd be able to read and get what people were trying to say. It was this kind of this image of sitting at the kitchen table. I mean, it's pretty glamorous. It's a doggone big house, but I don't know. But it's, that is where people are working. They're in their bedrooms mostly, but sometimes they can do kitchen, but it's a shared space. There's difficulties with people, 4 and 5 people living in the same room, and they're all trying to listen to lectures, and they're all trying to do their work, and they're all trying to, and it's just chaos. And the broadband bandwidth is not enough to cover all these kind of technical things on top of which we haven't really gotten into. We didn't really drill down. So it was interesting. So I'm conscious of the time here, so I'm going to kind of run through because I hope you have questions that we can address a few of them. What they liked was that there was no commute, but the bad part was there was actually longer hours, and they really missed getting to know their peers. What they liked was they got new tech skills. I think that there was a comment made that this time that most of the people who are students have so many more tech skills now than they did, 2 years ago, which is great. That is a plus. And it took a lockdown. I'd say on the other side, I'm sure as lecturers and others that we have a lot more because we had to. One of the lecturers said, I'm sorry, I'm kind of going back for a second. She was working 18 hours over the weekend of the I think it was the 15th, 16th of March, we got the lockdown just to try to figure out how to, lecture and do pre-records and different things. Her grown-up sons and daughters were laughing at her, but it was a huge learning curve for all of us. Just shortly on mature students, they have different needs, and in general, they're living in better living conditions than the traditional student. I use those air quotes purposely. And for some of them, hybrid really offered a flexibility that they really enjoyed. And I think, Janie, you wanted to kind of speak to that as an opportunity.
I think very much so. It's one of those things where I think, particularly if you're the main child carer in the house, or generally a lot, without being sexist, will fall to the woman. But I think to be able to work at your own, according to your own timetable, and they didn't mind at all the fact that there, if you like, was less opportunity for engagement because they knew how to communicate and how to connect in other ways. But it just, for me, highlighted the potential for the college to reach a wider audience, and also for then mature students who maybe didn't go to college in their earlier years or have had to adapt and learn different skills for different professions. There's another market opportunity there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
So almost finally, we had our kind of overnight survey brought in quite a few people, and it's actually interesting because we didn't have that, interaction. So these are isolated people writing about their thoughts, and just quick takeaways. Most of the fact students that responded wanted to be on campus. A blended approach was more welcomed by the faculty of enterprise and humanities those students, but we didn't hear from any business students in this because they didn't have to give what course they were doing. So I wonder if that was more about humanities rather than our enterprise student. There was more despairing feedback, to be honest with you. I felt my learning was impacted, and I definitely dealt with burnout. And there was, people were able to vent a little bit. And one of the comments was, I'd written something here, but it was too mean, so I took it away, which I thought was lovely. But what I really love, and I really want to drill into this more, is that, there's a real thoughtful approach to this. They're really considering the questions, and they're really trying to give their experience in a very authentic way. The first question, which is obviously, what was your experience like during COVID? My funniest response was, yikes. I absolutely love that. I think that, yeah, that about sums it up. Please record lectures. Presenting was less stressful when you're online because you didn't have to look at the people you're presenting to. I saw that happening in my experience as a lecturer last year as well. More help and support required for online learning. I mean, it's a heavier workload for the lecturers. The students need more help. They're really missing those corridor conversations where they can clarify small things within a brief. So it is a lot more time. 77% of the respondents were working from their bedrooms, which I thought kind of speaks for itself. All right. 78% felt their mental health was either impacted or impacted a lot regarding studying and learning. Okay, so those are the highlights of this. In our closing remarks, we have much more to do with this data, Janie. I hope you come on that journey at some point. We've got a lot of diverse opinions. One size does not fit all. There are themes between the three groups, but there are also, within the student population, there's lots of different things that what they would prefer, blended, face to face, and I was surprised to see so many people were looking for like a hybrid kind of model. But really, the inclusion of our students and our staff on the journey we're making in conversation, in advisement, is really, really important before we make moves. And our online does make more work for lecturers to support student learning. I don't know what our next steps are, but that's kind of up to you. I would like to thank you, and I will be part of that conversation. Don't you worry. I want to thank everybody for this, and we're going to open up some questions down the last few minutes we have. So you want to do the hands thing? What I might do is stop sharing my screen.